We come together to create a more abundant and optimistic version of the future.
I started what's called a tech conclave, and these are meetups in private residences throughout San Antonio.
We're investing in companies from the US and LatAm. 95% of our investors are from San Antonio.
The city, the county, and even, the private companies around San Antonio are now coming together to collaborate, support Tech Block, and push this initiative forward.
We're going to do a Texas Community Fund. We're going to invite essentially individuals, organizations, government foundations, other VCs to help fund more entrepreneurs. We wanted to help put them more into action and make things a little bit more accessible for them.
Texas has that as a secret sauce, the ability and the willingness to collaborate. Welcome to Forging the Future, and I'm here today in Austin, Texas at the Texas Venture Forum Gala, sitting down with Marisa Vickers. So Marisa, thanks for coming on, and you do so much. Tell us a little bit about what you do.
Thank you for having me. I'm a very busy woman.
Busy's good.
So basically, I'm on the board of directors with the Texas Venture Alliance. So I was working with CS putting this first event together. And my full-time job, though, is with Builders and Backers. I'm the director of global brand growth for them. Essentially, we are an investment firm, but we're also an idea accelerator. Basically, we act as a venture studio. So we have our builders in residence. They're a serial successful entrepreneur as well as an industry expert. We have a team that teaches people like low-code, no-cost tools. We have a marketing person and a social media person, a fractional lawyer on hand as well. Basically, what makes us different, though, from the regular other accelerators is that we also work with small to medium-sized businesses and also the nonprofits and the TikTok type influencers. We believe ideas are everywhere, not just in the hot spots of Silicon Valley. So our CEO is Donna Harris, and she used to be the managing director for Barack Obama's Startup America, and she also used to run 1776 Ventures. And so as a researcher and as an entrepreneur herself, she realized, that, being that there's entrepreneurial ideas that are just being left off the sidelines, we wanted to help put them more into action and make things a little bit more accessible for them. So we do this with a philanthropic Pebble Fund. We give people $5,000 to run an experiment and to be able to test it out and see if their idea works. So it's a very low cost, easy way for people to be able to get into entrepreneurship for the very first time. And we've seen this being very effective from all over the United States, across the heartland. We've been in smaller, areas that are not really known for entrepreneurship. So we're in the Delta regions, we're in Alabama, we're now also in Chicago this time around for the summer cohort. We're also in Louisville, Kentucky. We've been all across the states, and in the last 3 years, we've almost launched 1,000 builders.
Wow.
So we're going in faster, easier, but now we're starting to look towards Texas. And so the partnership that we have with the Texas Venture Alliance is tonight at the gala, this is the first time you're getting to hear it though, is we're going to do a Texas Community Fund. And so this is where we're going to invite essentially individuals, organizations, government foundations, other VCs to help fund more entrepreneurs. So to kind of read off of what we're doing, this fund will truly be the beginning of a community-wide effort where we invite cities, counties, corporations, foundations, or individuals to make 100% tax-deductible charitable donation. Through this donation, we enable hundreds of new entrepreneurs and their ideas and get catalyzing greater economic activity across the state of Texas and developing a larger pipeline of investable companies in every corner of the state. So we'll be sharing more details after the gala, but that's kind of what's going to be happening this summer. And me and CS, we're going to start doing a Texas road trip. We call each other the Venture Gals. So the Venture Gals are going to be all throughout the state, meeting people and hoping to start catalyzing something with this Texas Community Fund.
And do you know how large this fund's going to be yet?
We're shooting for $1 to $3 million right now. So it takes $5,000 to help create this fund. You know, say for instance, Brownsville wants to put in just for 5 entrepreneurs, get them through, then it's only $5,000 per individual.
I honestly haven't heard anything called a pebble fund before.
Yeah.
How does it work? So because like we provide our founders with $125,000 in cash and services, and they often tell me it's not enough to do something with.
Exactly.
So I'm very curious, what do you do with $5,000?
That's a really good question. So the way Donna, our CEO, began this is that she believes in funding the entrepreneur all the way through. So giving somebody that pebble, that little bit of funding to just test out an idea is where we want to start. So we have that, but then for those who are a little bit more in like the startup growth phase, although we do support all kinds of businesses, we do provide another $10,000 for those that are in that phase, and we continue working with them. And even as an alumni, no matter what type of business you are in, we still continue working with them. But then when we are in the investment side, when there is that growth, then we can invest from pre-seed all the way to Series C. And so like it's just creating this giant path of like funding, but in an entirely new way.
Interesting. So are there any restrictions over what you can spend the 5 or 10K on?
So the way it works out is that we do this through a Stripe card. We do this for a number of reasons. We don't want any tax implications on the person that's receiving the funding. It's easy to manage at the back end. So this $5,000 is not to start the business, it's to run the experiment. So we can like make sure that they're not going to use that $5,000 towards, you know, paying their rent.
McDonald's.
Yeah, or whatever you want to going on a trip or something. We actually work with them on the budget. People get creative running experiments, from, you know, pop-up events to, you know, creating some kind of like type of data set. So that way, you know, further on when they are talking to people who might be potential investors, like, hey, this idea does work. So they have the data to prove it. But essentially with these experiments, and we have people all the way from who are curing cancer and they're experimenting, doing something with this funding of something. And then we have people who have like been in the top 5 World Innovation ideas for South by Southwest, and it's like basically they are in Iowa University, and their company is called Laminar Scientific for reference, but they are actually running simulations for creating this device that generates energy from ocean waves. It powers up to 80 homes, and so they're doing beta pilots in Southeast Asia, and it works. They have many patents out for it, but what makes them different compared to all the other devices is that it's lighter and cheaper and easier to manufacture. So those are companies that are going through as well, and they're doing some things with that $5,000 to experiment and also just kind of learn how to be more scrappier in certain ways.
I can see that. I mean, certainly a skill to learn. Like, hey, what can you do with $5,000 and make it work? You know. So
yeah.
Well, thanks for coming on. I think that was something new for me, and I'm gonna have to dig into more and learn more about these pebble funds.
Yeah, I would love to introduce you to Donna too. So.
Perfect. And thanks for helping to be a sponsor of the Texas Venture Alliance.
Thank you so much. All right. Well, I'll see you at the gala.
Sitting down with Ileana Gonzalez, who is the Tech Block CEO. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Chris. Excited to be here and talking to you.
So how did you get really involved in startup in the venture capital industry? You've been in it for over 7 years now, right?
Yeah. So I actually started as the Tech Block like COO, you know, right-hand woman. And from there, I just discovered venture capital. I actually graduated from UTSA as an entrepreneurship major. And so, yeah, I had my own like medical device company that didn't go as far as I would have wanted to, but I knew that entrepreneurship and venture was what I wanted to get involved with. So I started with Capital Factory as a venture associate, and I brought Capital Factory down to San Antonio, and that's why they're now at Port San Antonio. And then I moved on to be at Techstars Anywhere, which is the worldwide accelerator, right? And I started sourcing from all of LatAm, the whole world, and that's how I got even more into venture. Then I got tapped to be Tech Block CEO, and so now I've been there for 8 months, so super excited to be activating the San Antonio tech ecosystem, growing the opportunity and access for the San Antonio founders, and investors into what's going on in the rest of the Texas, and that's why we're here.
Wow, you are busy. Well, it sounds like you've got the right amount of experience. How did you go about convincing Capital Factory to come to San Antonio? How did that happen?
So Capital Factory was in every single Texas city except for San Antonio. They had wanted to be tapped, and see what that ecosystem would look like. And so it was a little bit of a partnership between Tech Block leadership and Capital Factory wanting to come down. So it's not that I needed a lot of convincing because of the immense potential that San Antonio has, especially as you were talking about this mega region and us being about an hour away. So it was not hard to be convinced, but it is a lot more of Capital Factory's a little bit more later stage than what we have. And so it's been a lot of work to, bridge that gap between ideation to having an MVP to going to market to then be a part of Capital Factory. So it's still, an up and coming, and we're working on it.
And you said you were with Techstars as well, and you were actually involved with vetting out startups and...
Correct. So I moved on to be the venture associate. And so I was doing deal sourcing and I was doing investor relations. And so not only did I grow my network with founders, right, but I also grew my network with investors themselves, and I became an operator myself. So I started changing a little bit of the internal work and structure of Techstars, and all the other Techstars programs started mirroring it. But that's how I've just continued to be, an operator, but also kind of an investor, that connector, and deal sourcing also for those investors.
I think that's one thing that both founders and maybe even investors underestimate is the importance of building your network. How did you go about getting connected when you were first starting out?
Yeah, so I'm an immigrant, right? I came to the U.S. when I was 14, and that's something that I saw that in the U.S., and everybody says it, right? You've heard it. Your network is your net worth. And so I just kind of capitalized on it. I first discovered it when I became student body president of the University of Texas at San Antonio. And I started connecting with the rest of the state through the Board of Regents, right? And being that student that's just better connected. And I like to help people grow that access through what I've done. That way I could just, shorten that life cycle for them. So that's how I discovered it. And I continue to do it at events, right, like the Texas Venture Gala that we're at.
That is wonderful. Sounds like you've been doing that your whole life if you started out as student body. So tell me a little bit about what you're building as far as a community in San Antonio. What does that mean exactly?
Yeah, so we can think about all the innovation that we can do as an organization, but as I've identified the gaps in San Antonio, we really go back to basics, and it's about building the true community and access to each other and outside, like I mentioned. So it's Tech Block is just being the curator for resources that would really help to resources that are useful and to people that have done it. It's not just whatever workshop, hearing it for whoever. It's vetting truly who's gonna give the true value to the founders, because that's how we make San Antonio deals better deals.
So is it for the founders specifically? So you're trying to be a connector and facilitate collaboration between startup founders and
investors themselves, right?
Okay.
Because if I'm helping founders and I'm seeing them grow and be a better founder, getting the feedback and hearing the feedback, then that's what investors are looking for. So naturally, investors come after that is forged at the same time. But it's being that vetter, that collaborator as well, and coordination of the whole ecosystem. So it's been a lot of fun as I build it.
So if I was a founder in San Antonio and I wanted to access TechBlock or this community, what would I do?
So you go to satechblock.com and you become either a startup member, or you can even become an individual member if you haven't become a startup. If you join as a startup, there are a lot of perks that I've already built, right? From platforms, the way that, if you get into Techstars, you get access to $350,000. I'm at $250,000 if you become a TechBlock member. And it's very accessible due to, right, like San Antonio is just starting. So it's $150 a year if you become a startup Tech Block member. And from there, I'm a little bit of the traffic director, right? Of like, hey, like, are you into cybersecurity? Go to Port San Antonio. Are you into AI? Are you into SaaS? Go to ScaleWorks. Look at the private equity firms, this and that, right? And so it's more of getting you the right knowledge and the right access for you to continue to grow.
And then a lot of things have changed as far as having like in-person events, physical locations, virtual locations. How have you really built your community there? Is it virtual? Is it in person?
It's both. It has to be both, right? We do have the techies that are not as comfortable with the networking and they're not as extroverted. So we do have.
That never happens.
So it has to be both, right? So it is a platform where we all connect and there's different spaces that you can check out depending on what you're looking for. And we have the in-person activation. So from VIP lunches to networking events to workshops to more hands-on interactive, that's what TechBlock is activating San Antonio with.
Interesting. Well, there are so many accelerator programs, right? And each have their advantages, but what are you trying to do to be creative with your campaigns?
Yeah, so we're not an incubator and we're not a real estate play. We're not an accelerator either. We're just pretty much the curator and ecosystem for you to get plugged into, so I get you plugged into the rest of what those resources are already, but something that TechBlock is really doing also is I see San Antonio as the doors into LatAm because there's a lot of risk in LatAm that they're still being assessed by investors. And so many investors are asking LatAm companies to have some type of presence in market in the United States. And San Antonio can be that other city that they consider outside of Miami because it's gotten so expensive. And I'm all about the Texas dream as well, right? So if they consider San Antonio as that city that they can grow in. Also, from 0 to 10, Mexico has done really well. And the rest of LatAm, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Uruguay has done really well. But from 10 to 100 of their life cycle as a startup, they need way more than what there is in LatAm. So San Antonio has the resources and access for them to grow and to de-risk the investment for investors a little bit. So as a mostly Hispanic city, we are that city that they should consider, and that's the narrative that we're pushing as well as TechBlock.
How does that work? If I'm a founder in Mexico and I want to establish a presence in the United States, and let's say, okay, San Antonio might look like a good place for me. How would I go about that? Contact you and sign up for TechBlock?
They get plugged into TechBlock, and we kind of already creating the soft landing program. So we have Greater SATX that their job is to create a soft landing program for bigger companies. We're kind of partnering with them to create it for smaller startups and medium-sized. And so they contact TechBlock. They just kind of let us know what it is that they need. Most of them are going to need the real estate, right? The clients, the access to the community, and because of the term, right, nearshoring, they're already in LatAm. They can build. It's just about selling and find the clients as well. So that's why the narrative of TechBlock is not just the San Antonio tech ecosystem. It's the access to the rest of what is out there. So I'm not recreating the wheel. I'm just literally being the connector and access.
Okay. And does the city, I assume the city is supporting you in that effort? Because a lot of times they are interested in let's get Tesla, let's get these big companies in. And then you're like, well, what about the startups, right? Let's plant those seeds. Takes a little bit longer, but they are stickier.
Yeah. It's taken San Antonio a little bit longer, right? Because there's millions of dollars being invested in recruiting the bigger companies. But if we do the math, right, and those companies are promising you 300 jobs that, first 5 years, let's do it with smaller companies, right? How many of those would be 300? Let's do the math. It's not going to be that hard for us to attract them. And it doesn't take as much resources. So yes, the city, the county, and even, the private companies around San Antonio are now coming together to collaborate, support TechBlock, and push this initiative forward.
Yeah, I always wonder why cities didn't try to put more of those kinds of welcome kits together for the smaller companies rather than just saying, hey, let's give a tax break to this big multi-billion-dollar corporation, right? You can really spread a lot of that around and really create more, I think, impact.
Exactly. And and for cities that are, a little bit smaller, like San Antonio, that has to be the play, right? And it's a little bit about how Austin got built, right? It was the support of the Indeeds, the WP engines, right? And then everybody else came on, Facebook and Google and Tesla. But it was because of the support of the smaller ecosystem that eventually grew, why it started to become, right, that tech hub. I started what's called a tech conclave. And these are meetups in private residences throughout San Antonio.
Okay.
And I'm literally just putting 20, 25 people the most. And I get so many more people excited. It's about the connection truly and curating the room. It's so important because it's with intention. I'm not doing things at TechBlock to just check off the box because that's something that the city's asking me for. No, it's what we need. So it's being strategic about what you do in your actions and what comes out of it eventually.
Well, I think that's super interesting, actually. I learned a lot here that I want to maybe take back to Houston.
Yeah.
Because you're right. I mean, Houston is big, but maybe going small is really the key there.
Yeah.
And curating those meetups. And so I guess that's a page out of politics. Right?
Yeah.
So.
I mean, as ecosystem builders, we got to do it as a startup as well, right? And it's the little things that move the needle in the true findings, right? Of focus groups, of talking to people, of what matters to you. And that's been a question that I asked as I took over for Tech Block, is like, I asked from the smaller startups to the CTOs of Valero and Frost Bank of like, what would make you be bullish on us? Well, I'm missing this. I'm mixing. And literally it was the networking with intention. So that's what we're doing.
Well, thanks for being on the show, Ileana.
Of course, Chris, thanks for having me.
And I really enjoyed this conversation.
Likewise.
I'm sitting down with Sebastian Garzon, the executive director of Alamo Angels. Welcome
Chris,
to the
thank
show.
you for having me. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful day here in Austin.
It is beautiful. So Alamo Angels, it used to be known as San Antonio Angel Network, right?
That is correct.
Was there a reason for the name change?
We started in 2016 under the name of the San Antonio Angel Network, and then in 2018 is when the name change occurred.
Okay, so it's been a while.
And I came on board in 2020, which was a very interesting time because it was in the middle of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And so I had nothing to do with the name change, but one thing that I can say is Alamo, it's a very well representation of where we're coming from. And I do believe also that it's not just San Antonio, right? The Alamo is something that is well known because of the state of Texas.
Yeah.
And so we feel very proud of the name, and it's been a good one so far.
So tell me a little bit more about Alamo Angels. I mean, how big a group is it? What are you guys trying to do?
Alamo Angels, we have grown significantly over the past couple of years. As of today, we have 140 accredited investors that belong to our network. Something special and very unique about the Alamo Angels is that we are integrated with an organization in San Antonio that has been a champion of economic development for the past 40 years. The reason for which I believe that is very unique is because most angel investment networks across the nation are standalone entities. And as such, they run with very limited resources. Obviously, that is not to say that we have unlimited resources. I wish that was the case. But we do have the support and the backup of a larger entity that can be there for us when we need it. Why is that important for Alamo Angels? Because accounting, marketing, those are shared services that go through the bigger office, which allows me and my team to focus on what is important, which in my opinion is looking for good quality deal flow and getting accredited investors and then doing that matchmaking. And so yes, we've grown a lot, and we currently have 140 members, like I said.
So tell me a little bit about that partnership. And can you say who it is?
It's called Velocity Texas.
Velocity Texas. Okay.
And so there's a lot of things that Velocity has done. There's a research park owned by Velocity. Velocity Texas itself, it's an innovation center within a broader plan of building an innovation district. San Antonio, I don't know that many people recognize, but there is a pretty substantial presence of medical innovation happening in San Antonio.
Really?
There is 4 very, very well-known and pretty prestigious organizations that do research on those fields. That includes UTSA, that includes UT Health, SWIRI, the Southwestern Research Institute, and then UT Health. And so, I'm sorry, I think I had said UT Health before, but there's 4 of them, big research institutions that belong to our community, and that propels the industry as something where we're seeing some good innovations coming out of it.
I wouldn't have guessed med tech for San Antonio.
Yes.
I might have guessed. Well, obviously, I think HEB is headquartered there,
Yes.
right? And there's a few other industries in San Antonio, but I wouldn't have guessed med tech. That's interesting.
Yeah, I think the life sciences community is fairly strong and is getting stronger by the day because of what I've just shared before. And the reason I'm bringing it up, since you're asking about our relationship with Velocity, That's what they do. They are providing support to early stage companies within the life sciences. Built an innovation center that has office and lab space for those companies to grow and succeed ideally, right? And so we came into the picture in 2020. We integrated into the family of businesses of Velocity at that time. And it was a little different because we are not focused on life sciences. We are industry agnostic, investing on companies from a variety of different industries. But it worked out. We are a strong ecosystem player, and they wanted to support.
Well, it can always help to have an anchor, right?
Yes.
You know, what else besides medtech are you seeing or are you investing in the last year or two?
Yeah, we're investing on B2B SaaS. We're investing on some CPG products. I think what makes Alamo Angels a unique network as well is that, to my knowledge, and if there is any others either listening or watching this podcast, we love to connect, but I believe that in Texas, from an angel investing perspective, we may be the only group that is investing on Latin America. And so close to 2 years ago, we started looking at emerging markets and quickly realized that the one that made the most sense for us is LatAm. And obviously with everything that's happening now with the nearshoring opportunities and Mexico and Texas, growing that relationship, we continue to see a lot more opportunities on that end. And so to my knowledge, we're the only ones that are investing on that. Growing our portfolio on that end, we've got 6 companies on the portfolio, but hoping to grow that within the next few months.
Are you making direct investments in like Mexico or LatAm based businesses, or do they have to form an entity in the U.S.?
They do have to form an entity in the U.S. or the Cayman Islands. That's typically a best practice for us. Okay. They may be going after a LatAm market and looking to expand on that area or that region. But from a legal standpoint, the legal entity does need to be formed in the U.S.
Does that entity then hold the foreign entity if they already have one?
That is correct. Okay, it just makes us feel better, as you're making an investment. So
you own the parent company. You invest in the parent company.
Correct.
That has a subsidiary or a fully... Oh, yeah, okay. Interesting. Correct. So we should compare some notes.
Yeah, no, I'll tell you, we are not 100% focused on LatAm. Most of our investments continue to happen in companies from the US.
Okay.
But I do see a lot of opportunities in Latin America because, again, it's an emerging market.
Sure.
Imagine yourself if you would have invested when some of those big companies that we know today that came out of Silicon Valley, if you would have invested on them back then, when the ecosystem was just now getting started. That's the type of opportunity that I believe it's happening. They're highly skilled talent coming out of LatAm. I may be biased because obviously, as you can tell, I've got an accent, and the accent is coming from Colombia. So I was born and raised in Colombia, and I can see how the opportunities that are coming out of not just Colombia but all throughout LatAm are something that we are continue to hear from because the talent is there.
Well, I think it's a smart move. I mean, diversifying the portfolio with an emerging market, and you just don't know, obviously where the best deals are going to come from, but you see some opportunities there, and investing in 6 out of however many that you've done is I think a smart move.
Well, and then you take into consideration where we are from. We're investing on companies from the US and LatAm. 95% of our investors are from San Antonio. And when you go to San Antonio, you quickly realize that the cultural alignment in between Latin America and a city like San Antonio is very evident. And with that, I think that's why it works, and that's potentially the reason for which we may be the only one that is looking at that market for now. I do believe that there will be others coming into that picture in the future.
I've seen a lot of attention, actually, so I'm sure you're going to have quite a bit of other people looking there.
Yes.
I mean, it's a good cultural fit. I mean, really, been in Texas for 40 years, and when I'm in San Antonio or Houston, I mean, I joke sometimes it's North Mexico, and then when I'm in Monterrey, Mexico, it feels like South Texas.
Yes.
It's just you almost don't even feel a difference. So one last question: why are you here at the Texas Venture Gala? What are you hoping to accomplish?
Chris, I want to make sure that we continue to build upon what we've been working on. And when I say we, I'm talking about Texas. Texas, I don't think we need to re-emphasize the growth that we have had as a state, not only in the US, but all around the world. And in order for us to continue growing and getting our name out there and truly making something impactful happen, we need to know about each other. And so here at this forum, we've got people from Houston, Dallas, Austin, obviously, San Antonio, some of those major metropolitan cities, but we also have people from Brownsville. We got people from smaller towns that also belong to that broader ecosystem that can, learn more about each other, and perhaps rather than duplicating any efforts, maybe we'll just identify opportunities for us to collaborate. I think that's the beauty of this.
Yeah, I think Texas has that as a secret sauce, the ability and the willingness to collaborate.
Yes.
I'm hearing that as a theme, right? It's not just about the money. It's not just about building a startup. It's not just about the technology. It's really about those personal relationships.
Yeah. I mean, for us, investing, as probably you know this, right? You are investing on, we like to say we are investing in the jockey and not the horse. And so with that, we're always looking at the team, and for you to have a good relationship with those founders, and for them also to have a good relationship with you, because this is almost like a marriage. You're going to be tied to each other for a good number of years, and you want to establish a solid foundation. But it all starts from that relationship, right? And then the investment can happen, or the business relationship can happen. But like getting to know each other as a person, that's the main thing.
And speaking of which, I've enjoyed getting to know you.
Thank you, Chris. Same here.
Thanks for coming on the show.
I appreciate the invitation, and hopefully we can continue to exchange notes and collaborate as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Chris.
I'm sitting down with Arooj Sheikh, who is a founder and futurist and a visionary entrepreneur and the founder of Wealth Visionaries Collective, a platform for global capital allocators to collaborate and innovate. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Super excited to be here.
Well, tell me a little bit more about this. Sounds super cool. What is it that you do?
Absolutely. So the Wealth Visionaries Collective, we are a private think tank and community and network of family offices, institutional investors, sovereign wealth funds, and other high-level capital allocators. And essentially what we do is we come together to create a more abundant and optimistic version of the future. And as you must know with Forging the Future is something that we're constantly creating, and we are always creating this with our choices, the way that we build businesses, the way that we allocate capital. And so really thinking more intentionally about the ways in which we're doing that. So essentially what we do is we come together to really think about the ways that we can reverse engineer the kind of society that we want to see through smart capital allocation and shifting financial incentives. Many of our conversations hinge at the intersection of ancient civilizations, exponential technologies, and a full reimagination of our world and society at scale. And we do this by hosting both in-person and virtual events, with the aim to educate and inspire capital allocators to open up greater pools of capital to the things that matter. One of the things that we do really exceptionally well is the kind of curation that we do with the people that we bring into our events. It's not so much just about, capital allocators as a general. It's also about people with the right heart, integrity, values, character, and people that want to align that with where they're putting their money. And so really thinking again more intentionally about that. We've literally had events, for example, one that we hosted during South by Southwest, where our event was supposed to be 3 hours long, and people stayed an extra 3 hours after the event, just organically having conversations. And I'm surprised our venue didn't kick us out, but I'm very glad that they didn't, because it was just so deeply enjoyable and like an honor and a privilege to get to host and curate these kinds of events and conversations.
Well, on this show, we talk a lot about the future, but you mentioned ancient civilizations.
Yes.
So I'm trying to understand how that actually plays into what you're doing.
Yes, absolutely. So, the ancient civilizations piece, well, here's the thing. So really fundamentally what we're thinking about is, how do we design society to be something that uplifts and genuinely benefits all of humanity? And we also think about this not only on, a collective humanity level, but also from an individual to individual basis, right? And we think about things in the sense of most of the world, they're just trying to make ends meet. There's no space for creativity to flourish when you're trying to put food on the table. And I think there's so much perspective to be brought into the room. And it's interesting because like even at Davos, for example, it was like having like conversations and like bringing perspectives as someone that's spent a fair bit of time like living abroad, right? Of bringing those kinds of perspectives of like, it is like an honor and a privilege to work on climate change. Like we can sit around in this room and we can talk about climate change because we know that we have our basic needs met. And most of the world, they don't have that luxury or privilege, you know? So like, how do we think about designing a society where, you know, we really kind of optimize for that and we democratize like wealth creation opportunities, for example. And also kind of like tying that back to the ancient civilizations piece. It's really interesting, I think more so from the perspective of, you know, we've had so many case studies of the way that civilization has worked. And so, as you know, if we don't study or learn from history, it repeats itself. And this kind of also ties back towards, you know, like exponential technologies and things of that nature, because so much of this is really more so tied into human behavior, and human behavior repeats itself. And whereas the technology mechanism can be new. And really with that, you know, an example that I like to give is that during any period of, you know, flourishing society, we have always invested into art and sculptures and the beautification of our world. And not so much when the economy is not doing so well. And we look at something like NFTs, for example, and the technology mechanism might be new, but the desire to beautify our world, whether it be physical or digital, that stays the same, you know? And so really thinking about the ways that that will fluctuate and flourish and not flourish, you know, according to how human behavior has always functioned. And so a lot of kind of looking back to ancient civilizations and thinking about the future, I think it is kind of like we have so many data points of how civilization has functioned to date. And I think it would be a shame to not kind of like use those as case studies. So we've had some very interesting conversations, as you can imagine. I think it could very much surprise us, like what humans of the future kind of look back to us now and think about. I love to really infuse everything I do with like a lens of optimism. I think a lot of the conversations like around the future are very like doom and gloom. And I mean, here's the thing, like you get what you expect, right? And if we could change expectations to be like a little bit more optimistic, like perhaps we can actually help shift things that way. And we think it's like this big, scary thing. And no, it's not. Like it's one person at a time. You know, you change one mind at a time. And every conversation, like it has like exponential effects, you know? And you never know what the person in front of you is going to do differently as a result of a conversation that you had, or as a result of like, you know, their mind being changed about something. So I think it's a really beautiful thing.
It's very philosophical. And it's fun to talk about. But how do you get investors interested in that topic in a way to where you're going to create wealth?
Absolutely. And I think really like the conversation here is I think any major period of us pivoting into different technologies, different structures. I mean, AI, for example, is fundamentally changing the way that we function as a society, as a world, you know? And there is an author, Mo Gaudat, I might be mispronouncing his name, but that was a really fascinating kind of perspective that I took away from is like, I think it was something like in 50 or 100 years, like it will be that the intelligence of AI relative to human is going to be like Einstein compared to like a fly, you know? And I think that's the thing with exponential technologies. It's like, it's so hard for us to fundamentally grasp when we're so accustomed to thinking in a linear fashion. And so even thinking exponentially is quite a challenge for us. I think one of the things that we really like kind of have as our North Star is like, we're all making this up as we go, the best of us, like the very, very best of us, you know? And so really thinking about like, where are the conversations happening and like, where are the opportunities? And the opportunities are where you're placing more of your bets.
Okay, last question. You've traveled a lot. You've seen a lot of different global economies. You see any global trends in entrepreneurship, from Davos to Texas to wherever you've been recently?
Yeah, wherever I've been recently, and yeah, that's definitely. So I would say one thing that I have seen. Interestingly enough, both on the capital allocator side as well as the entrepreneur side, I've seen a lot more emphasis and focus on ecosystem building, especially for the firms and the entrepreneurs that have been rather successful. And I say this in the sense of, for example, at Davos, like there were a lot of conversations happening in the realm of like systems investing, for example. And then on the entrepreneur operator side, like I've seen a lot of venture studio models really take off. And it's so interesting because especially with, things like AI and the barrier for business building getting a lot lower, if you have like a centralized operations, it's repeatable. It's so repeatable and it's so scalable. And the thing is, in my own experience, like I've always had such an interdisciplinary approach to things, and I'm a person that like connects the dots. Like if there's one thing that I can do, if I have one skill, I can connect the dots. Like I find patterns and things. And with that, it's so interesting because like when you're going about building not just one business, but several of them, like you find a lot of operational similarities. And, there's so much that can be done in terms of like, let's say that you have like two different companies and they're both CPG products and they have a similar customer profile. That makes marketing a whole lot easier. And so really thinking about not only capital efficiency, but also de-risking. It de-risks significantly if you have like proven repeatable expertise in that way. And that also kind of, speaks well towards the investor and capital allocator side of things in terms of like how do you hedge risk?
Well, I agree with you. It's definitely our fund plus studio plus services model is making that repeatable. It's like, well, let's take a process that we've been using for the Fortune 500 to develop products and software and hardware and apply it to startups who actually really do need those resources and don't have the resources of, Epson or AMD or Dell or whoever, right? So it's even more important for them to leverage that kind of skill set. It's interesting. Well, thanks for coming on the podcast. This is a very interesting conversation.
Thank you. I quite enjoyed it. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, let's go for the future.
Amazing.